Good morning and welcome to Coffee with Mr. V. We're on to episode 24. How about that? Who knew we'd get this far? So today I want to do asymmetric information. I don't think it will take quite as long as some of the other episodes, but you know the score by now. If you want to participate with Coffee with Mr. V, go and grab yourself a coffee, or if you don't like coffee, go and grab your favorite liquid, put it in a mug, a glass, or a cup, and then come back here. And together we are going to do the synchronized sip. And that is going to be the best part of your day. So here we go. 3, 2, 1. I love coffee. So asymmetric information, which pretty much then completes most of this market failure topic. But asymmetric information is very easily defined as being a situation in which one economic agent has more information about a particular good or service than the other economic agent. Economic agents, consumers, producers. So the most common scenario that you're going to have is when the producer has more information about a product than the consumer. And you see this in lots of walks of life. The classic example in economics is the second-hand car, because this was the study done by an economist called George Akerlof, who won the Nobel Prize for asymmetric information, in which he identified asymmetric information occurring in the second-hand car market. Producers knew all the information about second-hand cars. They knew the history of the car, how many accidents it had been in, who the previous owners were, whether they were likely to have driven the car badly or very well. They knew how much, what repairs they needed doing. If any of you have watched Matilda or read the book, you'll know that Matilda's father in that book is a second-hand car owner. And basically what he does is he winds back the mileage clock, he puts sawdust in the gearbox. And people buy these cars because they run out of the showroom, and then about 2 or 3 weeks later, they all just die. So George Akerlof noted this, and he called it a market failure. He did a kind of similar market microeconomic analysis with it, diagrammatic analysis. And he kind of portrayed it as a market failure, as, you know, this being a way in which the free market does not allocate resources efficiently. So let's have a look at it from a diagrammatic perspective. Here is our demand for second-hand cars, and here is the supply for second-hand cars. And in the free market, then, we would consume here at QFM, Q free market. Again, this is very much something that I've come up with. QFM normally in any kind of textbook just be Q1, but I call it QFM because it shows us where the market would produce in the free market. But this demand, and it's the demand curve I want you to concentrate on here, is based on full information. This is you. This assumes full information. This assumes that you have perfect information about the second-hand car, that you know how it runs. But what we've identified then is in some markets that this isn't the case, that actually the information you're being given by this producer, and I want you to visualize the unscrupulous producer, the guy who's trying to sell you a car, even though he knows that it's a pile of junk. He's feeding you false information. Oh, it's only done 40,000 miles. Oh, it's never been in an accident. You know, it's, nothing needs changing on the car ever. Okay, it'll run perfectly for 2 years. You've got no problem. But that's potentially then false information, which is why I call this default. I've been given false information, or maybe it's partially correct. Maybe he hasn't necessarily lied to me, but he's been very economical with the truth. He hasn't told me all of the facts about the car that might stop me from buying it. Remember, his incentive is to sell as many cars as possible. He's a profit maximizer. So he might exaggerate the truth. He might sneak in 1 or 2 lies a little bit. So this is based on full information. If I really had full information, if he came clean about all the possible pitfalls and the disadvantages about the car, then it might be that I would be still willing to buy the car, but my demand curve would be shifted to the left. because I would be willing and able to pay a lower price. So this isn't to say there isn't a market for secondhand cars. All right. Some people might just want a car that only runs for the next 2 weeks. Okay. I've been in that situation before where I've done long road trips in a particular country and it's been very expensive to rent. And I've quite often wondered, well, what's the cheapest that I can actually buy a car? I only need it to run for the next 3 or 4 weeks. Can't I just buy one? So that's what I want you to get in your head, that there still might be a market for this product, but it's just that people would be willing and able to pay less. And therefore we shift the demand curve inwards. This means then that less secondhand cars would be bought and also at a lower price. But I want you to focus on this here, the quantity chain, because bringing it back to what we talked about with market success, this is where community surplus would be maximized. Yeah, this is where assuming there are no externalities, this is where the social costs, which are the private cost plus the external cost, which here is zero. So this is the social costs are lower than the social benefits. Okay, remember, assume no externalities. This is social benefits are private benefits plus external benefit, which is zero. So this would be the community surplus. And therefore, that's where it would be maximized at Q2. And in fact, I should not label that Q2. I should label that QSOL, socially optimum level. But in the free market, we would consume up to here because we're being fed these lies. We're being fed this false information, which makes us more willing and more able to buy the product than we would be if we had the full information. So we then call this the welfare loss triangle, because social costs would be higher than social benefits for all of these secondhand cars that are made. Now, it's not just secondhand cars, but there are lots and lots of examples that you might see this, where people feed you kind of exaggerated, false, partial information to try and get you the product. So, for example, it might be a particular brand of watch that's kind of advertised in such a way that you think it's great, but actually it's not quite as great as you think they are. Or a particular makeup product that's been marketed in a particular way. It's not necessarily a lie as such, but it's also not giving you the full information. You know, maybe it's been tested on animals and you didn't know that it was tested on animals. So I would say asymmetric information is probably the most common market failure out there. Now, it's not very often that you see a diagrammatic analysis of it done like this, okay? But the diagram works, and I think it illustrates it in terms of what we've been doing with market success and market failure. So you wouldn't necessarily be asked to draw this diagram, but this is kind of what it looks like. I think it helps for when we look at potential solutions. So the potential solution then for this is some sort of information campaign to try and tell people exactly what the full information is, or kind of government regulation in the market. So what I mean by that is the government coming along and doing inspections of secondhand car producers, the government's doing inspections, or I don't know, certifying certain sellers to say these guys definitely tell the truth, or some sort of government regulation in terms of making things a little bit more transparent. A lot of the time you now see these 14-day cooling off periods, that if you buy something, you have 14 days to take it back if you're not happy. And again, that's all about asymmetric information. So maybe you bought something, but once you've tried it out and trialed it, tested it, and it's not quite the thing you thought it was, or maybe you bought the car and it doesn't work after 14 days, that you have the option of taking it back and getting a refund. All of this then is really meant to stop the market failure coming along in the first place. So where were we? I've lost my bearings a little bit. That's where we were. Sorry. But this market failure, all of these potential solutions, what they're trying to do is to reduce the demand curve here. And the way in which they're reducing the demand curve is they're giving the economic agent, the consumer in this case, the full information in order that they now have much more accurate information about their demand preferences, that their demand preferences are correctly or accurately represented now in the market. So we've shifted the market there, and we've now arrived back at the socio-optimum level. Obviously, these things don't work perfectly. The evaluations, they were quite easy. Maybe the information campaign doesn't reach everybody. Maybe the government regulation is very expensive. Maybe it's ineffective in the sense that there are too many people to police and they can't police it. Maybe it's potentially corrupted in that, people, the second-hand car dealer pays off the government official when he comes around to complete the inspection. There are ways in which this might fail. But nevertheless, that's the idea. So you can see how that works. 9 times out of 10, this is the way in which it will work. The other scenario, though, is that the producer might have less information than the consumer. Or let me say that the other way around. The consumer has more information about the product than the producer. This is the most common scenario. Producer has more information, but a less common scenario, but it does happen, is that the consumer has more information. Typical examples of that are things like yard sales or car boot sales, in which somebody is selling something from their attic and they don't quite realize the value of it. So maybe it's an expensive vase or a limited edition comic or something like that. And the consumer who has very niche knowledge about that particular product can think, oh, that's actually a really rare, expensive thing, and they pick it up for £2. Or another example might be health insurance. So if I go and get a health insurance policy, I have to go and fill in a load of forms about my healthcare. But what's to say that I might not be a little bit sneaky when I fill the form in? When the form says, "Have you ever smoked?" Oh no, I never smoked ever. Yeah, but actually in the past, maybe I've been a smoker for 5 or 6 years. Who knows? Okay. In that scenario, then, the diagram is just the opposite way around. The consumer has full knowledge, okay, but the producer does not. This is the consumer with false or partial information, or just not quite as full information as he or she would wish. If they did have full information, they'd be much less willing to sell it, or they'd be willing to sell it but at a much higher price. So the supply curve would be shifted right. So again, it's the market failure, just like down here, is over allocation, overconsumption. We're buying and selling too many of these things. This person in this case is selling the comic at too low a price, whereas actually they might still be willing to sell the comic, but if they had full information, they wouldn't accept kind of £1. They would accept the £1,000 that the limited edition comic might cost. So there you go. There is asymmetric information done in a nutshell. It's a much smaller part of the market failure syllabus than some of the others. I don't know realistically if you'd ever need to draw these diagrams, but you can draw the diagrams because they do work diagrammatically. Right, thank you very much. Cheers for turning up. Big shout out to Tom. Tom has liked my last 2 videos. I don't really know who Tom is, but Tom, thanks very much for the likes. Keep watching. Okay, here's to you, buddy. And guys, stay safe. Keep taking care of yourselves. All right. See you soon. Bye.